represent various departments. Well, every department has a story to tell. And we're going to try to talk about today is how do you build that story, how do you prepare for the telling of that story. I have some friends who work for Boeing, and they say it's their job to get 1 million different parts to work together in order to get something to fly. That's a process of structure, right? Project management, organization. Well, I have some friends at NASA who say with enough thrust, you can get anything to fly. So that's direction. So we're going to talk a little bit about structure. We're going to talk a little bit about direction to help you think through how you can tell your stories from your perspective, building capacity with your own departments. So I want to take a look at this building here. It's a David Fisher design. It should be up near the end of this year in Dubai and Moscow. It's a wonderful design in terms of thinking about building a story, right? Each of those blocks can twist and turn. And as you think about those twists and turns and the narratives of the people in your department that you want to be able to represent and reify, how do you build those up? Now this is a little bit too yertle the turtle for me, right, when you begin stacking. For me, stories about creating iterative process. I talk about in documentary film not just making films about people, about teachers, about research. It's about making films with teachers. The tools and the technology are ready to hand now that each and every one of you can tell that story and be a part of that story. But that story is not just the end product. Stories in digital and film are not just one-offs. They're part of a process of building relationships. So today we're going to talk about story development, pre and production, but it sort of goes together. Some equipment you can see here, and then some of the resources that you all might need, and then we'll have time for question and answer because I'm sure that's why you're here, to help you figure out what you all need to do.
The idea here is that we're going to be telling stories. Now, a lot of the stuff that comes out of the university, the stories tend to be informational. It's something that you want to get across about something really cool that we're doing here. But one thing that I've always taken to heart is when Don Hewitt was creating 60 Minutes, the whole point of it was tell me a story. So what you want to do is, for example, taking that to the university level, if you're doing a story on UW-Medicine's Regional Heart Center, okay, it's great, it's wonderful, they do all these things, but we tell that through the story of the 16-year-old whose heart was essentially dying and a heart transplant saved him, and now his parents are so happy. So it's kind of, when you're thinking about how to get your information across, you're looking at, is the basis of this, is there a good story here? Is there some drama? Can I tell this in a visual way? I mean, some things actually just work so much better for print, so you want to keep that in mind. And then when you're thinking about the story, are people going to be like touched, amused, outraged? Are they going to have either that emotional reaction, or are they going to see what's in it for me personally or globally? So there has to be a reason they're watching this. If they're going to hear what you're going to say, you have to get them in the tent first. So if you're not telling it in a way they're going to watch, your message is essentially lost.
Yeah, and that gets to the purpose of the story, and the question I always like to ask, whose interests are being served by the telling of this story? Is this story for donors? Is this story for alumni? Is this story for my colleagues and faculty? Is this my story for students? And I think all of you are going to nod your head and say yes to all of the above. But how do you craft your story according to a particular audience? The continuum of stories would be along the lines of investigative stories, investigative reporting, and advocacy, or sort of informational infomercials. And there used to be a huge chasm there, but I don't think we're no longer living in an either-or world. It's a both-and. Investigation through advocacy and an advocacy through investigation. People don't just want to see the fluff piece. They want to know what meaning is this making, what difference is this making. I talk about the 4 R's. The films need to be relational. They need to be relevant. They need to have rigor, and they need to demonstrate results. And if you can get those 4 R's coupled with this notion of whose interests are being served, you're 1 inch closer to crafting a story. But then the work really begins.